Hello, my name is Mr. Hilpert, and today we're going to be looking at how to use a sliding compound miter saw. Sliding compound miter saw is a fantastic tool in the wood shop and the construction site, as it allows you to make really good, accurate crosscuts of your material. This saw in particular allows you to slide the head back and forth, allowing you to cut very large pieces of material. But before we can begin using this machine, we need to make sure we're wearing the proper PPE. First off, we must make sure that our clothing is tight to our bodies. This way nothing gets caught in the blade as it's spinning. Then we must make sure we're wearing some sort of eye protection. Safety glasses are usually recommended. Additionally, this machine is really loud, so we're going to make sure we're wearing some form of hearing protection. Earmuffs work, or I prefer earplugs. Now, when we get ready to make our cut, we need to make sure that we're doing a couple things as we're making the cut. The first thing on the list is to make sure that when we are cutting our material, our hands don't enter this red section here, which is the path of the blade. Obviously, anything that's in that area is probably going to get cut. And if that happens to be your fingers, that's not a good thing. You're going to lose them. So make sure that when while you're holding on the table, your hands are not in the red zone. The other thing we need to be aware of is our workpiece needs to be held firmly against the table and the fence. This means that we need to make sure that there's no debris or junk sitting on the table or up against the fence that can cause our workpiece to tilt up at weird angles or not be held against the fence firmly. Just do a quick inspection, make sure that there's nothing there. Now, when you're ready to make the cut, it's important to make sure you hold the workpiece or the material up against both the table and the fence firmly. You can't just let it sit there. You've got to hold it. When you go to make the cut, make sure that the saw blade reaches full speed before you enter the material. And also make sure that once you have finished your cut, you let the saw blade come to a full and complete stop. I'll demonstrate. Now, by doing this, we can make sure that the material that we are cutting doesn't get kicked back or sucked into the machine or bind up the blade. This makes sure that we are always very safe with our cutting. A really good technique for the table saw is to use something called a stop block. So in this case, I've got this piece of material here clamped to the fence with this quick clamp. This is a really good tool, a really good method for making cuts, repeatable cuts. If I use this, I only have to measure once, and it's a lot more accurate than making a bunch of different measurements and trying to achieve the same measurement a bunch of different times. This is the way to go. Really, you should get in the habit of using a stop block anytime you need to make more than a single cut. But there is a problem with using these things. At some point, the space between the blade and the stop block gets a little too small for safe use. So you need to be sure you know what you're doing with this type of thing. You might end up needing to use a clamp to hold the piece of material in place while the cut is made. This may not be an option though, in which case you should come up with a different way of cutting the material. If the material is a little bit longer, then you can go ahead and make multiple cuts repeatably. So, Again, you want to make sure the blade comes to a full and complete stop before resetting for the next cut. These two pieces of material are now exactly the same height because we were able to use our stop block. No measurement required. It's also really important to make sure that the table doesn't get a bunch of junk collected on it. So make sure you throw out any scrap that you may start to accumulate as you use this machine. You'll notice that in most cases I have a trash can located directly behind the machine that you just toss your scrap pieces into. Do that frequently. This machine can build up a lot of scrap pieces really quick. If the machine becomes bound up while you're making a cut, release the trigger and hold the machine in the air like it's cutting until the blade has come to a full and complete stop and the motor has stopped making noise. At which point you can then move the saw blade up and unbind the material. Another feature of this saw is the ability to make multiple miter cuts. So not just making cross cuts, but the ability to make angled cuts. To do this, there's a lever located underneath the arm of the machine. Pick up the lever and swing the machine to the proper angle you want to cut. The machine has several built-in stops, which will automatically allow you to make accurate cuts at various angles. In particular, 0, 15, and 45s. These are some of the most common cuts. When you're making this type of cut, understand that the amount of room you have to hold materials changes. A cut that was normally just fine for me to hold right here now has most of my arm sitting in the danger zone. You need to be aware of that when you're making a cut. Whenever possible, try and swing the blade away from your body instead of toward the body. And if you must swing the blade towards your body, consider using a clamp to hold your work. This is not safe. Don't do this. This position will make the same angle cut at 45 while holding the material in a safe position. You'll notice that my hand is not in the red zone. You can go ahead and do this. In general, it's also a really good idea to test the cut to make sure it's going to do what you think it will. So I'm going to pretend to make this cut just to make sure my hand isn't in any danger. And I'm going to watch my cut as I'm making it. And in particular, I'm going to watch my holding hand as I'm making the cut, because it's really easy for your thumb or fingers to accidentally push into the red zone, the danger zone. In this case, I'm holding it, but my thumb is directly in the way of the blade. And I got there naturally. So really watch what you're doing when you're using this tool. If you do, it'll work all day long for you, and it's a great thing to have around.